back. Welcome to Abstractable. This is a podcast for the entrepreneurial spirited, the curious, the hungry, and people who want to learn a few things. We distill down the ideas from our favorite thinkers, the world's best thinkers in business, startup, psychology, society, you name it. This is Abstract Chat number 3 by us, Ryan and Lockie.
That's it. So in the Abstract Chat, we generally talk about the last 10 episodes that have been and try and weave different ideas, I suppose, from all the different books together. So in this episode, we talk about books like Shoe Dog, Lessons from History, American Kingpin, Fooled by Randomness, and kind of what they all have to do with one another. We explore themes from a lot about society and humanity and how they kind of blend through some of the business books we talked about. And we also talk about randomness and what startup culture has to do with dentistry. So one of the other things that we always do in these podcasts is we update everyone on what's been happening with us and with the pod in general. And so you can catch that towards the end of the episode. So don't forget, you can find full video of us talking on YouTube. And so check out our channel there. And we've got a website too at abstractable.co. So lastly, if you enjoyed the episode, we'd love it if you shared it with someone. We really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the episode. Effectively, what you can take away is that breathing exercises, some are pretty good for you. Breathe through your nose, not through your mouth. And the perfect breath is a breath through the nose for 5.5 seconds.
Make sure you get these facts right.
5.5 seconds is the perfect breath. So you want to have about 5.5 breaths per minute, roughly, or something like that.
So 5 seconds in, and then what happens on the out? You do whatever you want. Is that 5 seconds?
That's not right. That's not right. I was just trying to give a bit of effect in the microphone. Yeah. So
if your breathing sounds like that, go to a doctor.
Read the book. And snoring's not good for you.
Yeah.
If you can
I've heard that some running coaches, maybe there's a specific running coach that was famous for this. I'm not sure. But one of the techniques is to, for their runners, when they're doing laps or whatever it is in their training, is they will get them all to, take a glass of water or, a drink of water, fill up their mouth with the water, and then say, go for your run, and I expect you to bring back all that water when you arrive back. So the point being, you literally cannot breathe through your mouth when you've got a mouthful of water, forcing them to breathe through their nose.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think it's really good for your VO2 max, and just how readily you are able to make oxygen work for you, and not to mention the actual oxygen that you're getting into your body. As you mentioned before, mate, I've also read stuff that people, we're only using like 70% of our lungs or something like that. Some percentage. The percentage is certainly not right, but there's a percentage of our lungs that just basically aren't being used. And as a result, a lot of the time our brains are starved of oxygen, or the oxygen that they could be getting. And like we're talking about breathing exercises. If you do a couple of minutes or even a minute of pump breaths in and out, so like that type of breathing, you'll get to the end of it and you'll feel high. Like you'll feel like on another planet. And all you're doing is just breathing, which is pretty unbelievable. And so breathing exercises are focused around a similar thing. That's
pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out.
Sounds like something everyone could benefit from. I think I'm going to give it a read, and we might.
Do you breathe through your nose much?
I try to. But I actually, here's a fun fact. I used to have a deviated septum until I was I don't even know what age, maybe like 18, 19 or something like that, I got like some nasal surgery to fix that. And prior to that, I would get sinus infections like every second week. Every month I was getting sinus infections. You know, it was just a perpetual cycle. And effectively, I remember getting the surgery, and obviously straight off, you know, coming straight out the back of it, it's very shit because your nose is just totally useless. But then, you know, a month or two down the track after your nose is recovered from the surgery, it was unbelievable. It was like I'd never actually breathed in my life, you know, prior to that.
Amazing.
And
that would have been a good feeling.
And to this day, you know, this is 10 plus years on. I have never had a sinus infection again.
Yeah, that's interesting. So they talk about that there's a lot of sort of ducts in the nose and around the nose that the air goes through and gets warmed up before it goes into your lungs. And they also talk about, because we don't chew as much as sort of modern people, our mouths have shrunk, and the space in our mouths has got a lot less too. That has a big effect on your breathing and the health of your breath. So yeah, pretty interesting. So tell me, what are we doing today in our episode?
Well, we're up to abstract chat number 3.
Doesn't time fly?
It flies. That means that we've recorded effectively 30 plus episodes, which is exciting, mate.
That's really cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like 30, but 30 is a lot.
It is. And we're not going to cheat today either. We're not going to talk about episodes that fell outside of the 10 brackets. So, because I think the book Range has probably had mentioned in the last 2 abstract chats, so it's not going to get even mentioned in this one.
Okay, so now we're back on track. We're actually going to record this about the 10 episodes that we're releasing.
So episodes 21 through to 30 is what's contained. Yes,
that's the rules.
Yeah.
So I guess that shows our level of professionalism now has drastically increased.
Oh, look at that! We have become professionals now.
Incredible. So I guess that kind of tradition in these type of episodes now is to talk about the themes that have kind of been spun together through the last 10 episodes, but also our favourite books from the last 10 episodes and why, and then a bit of update on us and what we've been up to and what's happening with the podcast. So without further ado, I think maybe would it be worthwhile just sort of running through the names of the last 10 episodes?
I think that would be super valuable, mate. Just so people know what we're actually talking about. See, this is the professionalism.
Oh, it's just
so
imagine what Abstract Track 10 is going to be like. Oh my God.
Unbelievable. Episode 21, Creative Curve. Episode 22, Lessons of History. 23, Fooled by Randomness. I should actually be telling the author names as I'm doing this. But I won't, just to keep it consistent. Episode 24.
Save it for Abstract Chat 4.
Okay. 24, American Kingpin. 25, Abstract Chat 2. 26, Obstacle is the Way. 27, How to Start a Startup. Noting that wasn't actually a book. That was a lecture series. 28, How to Win Friends and Influence People. 29, Shoe Dog. And episode 30, 0 to 1.
Very cool. It's hard to pick favourite books because I've got a bit of Kevin MacLeod about me on Grand Designs, where I like them all. So
sorry, I had to work out who Kevin MacLeod was.
You know, Grand Designs guy, and every time he leaves
the Australian version or the
no, it's the British one.
Okay,
so every time he leaves a house, he loves it. It doesn't matter if it's like the worst build ever. He'll find something positive to say about it. So I feel like that's kind of me with books. I love all the books I read. There's not many that I don't really enjoy, particularly if they make the episodes. So picking a top 2 or 3 is pretty tough.
I'm not an avid season to season follower like you of Grand Designs, mate, but the few episodes that I've seen, I remember getting to the end of the show and the guy, I'm not sure if it's the British or the Australian version, would always leave this comment about, it was almost like a two-sided thing. Like he hadn't made a decision if he'd liked the house or not. It must
so you reckon he sat on the fence?
Yeah, he just sat in the middle. And, he's like, these guys have embraced a new way of thinking about the home and incorporating, the grassy elements on the top of the roof. Yet, will this impact them down the track with in-house dampness and mold? And
Probably.
And just leave these like open-end rhetorical questions at the end of the show, and you never really worked out if he liked it or not. Maybe it was the other
interesting.
version.
That must be the Australian one. Yeah, because Kev's pretty keen on most of the houses he
just
walks
loves
into.
everything. It's like, this is amazing.
Just loves it. Yeah, and at least some.
I love what you've done with this shipping
speech
container
at the end. Yeah, that's right. So anyway, what are your top books from the last 10?
Okay, so
don't give us that wishy-washy answer that you just described.
The McLeod answer. We
won't go McLeod.
We won't McLeod it. I like that.
McLeoding it is actually talking about how good it is. So you do want to McLeod it in this instance.
Yeah, but we don't want to McLeod everything.
No, you want to be honest.
Yeah. But I like cloudiness. There's a bit of a pun in there. So anyway, let's leave that. Okay. So Fooled by Randomness, right? Surprise, surprise. Nassim Taleb. Straight up, there's no wishy-washy in this. That was
I don't think any of the listeners will be particularly surprised by that selection.
No, and it also means that he's had a mention in this week's episode as well. Very fitting. So
for those playing Nassim bingo at home, just tick off early.
Tick off this episode. So Fooled by Randomness, obviously Nassim Taleb's first book in the Encheto series, and there's a few things that really grabbed me about this. So first of all, for anyone that hasn't read Taleb, his writing style is super entertaining, to say the least. Not only is there, a lot of depth to the actual thinking that goes on, or at least in my opinion, or I'll probably speak for both of us, Lockie, our opinion. But
yes,
okay. But he is extremely entertaining when he writes, because usually he's paying the shit out of someone when he's talking about some of these things.
Doesn't hold back, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's no bars held.
Was there anything particular? I mean, there's a couple of key themes out of that book, but it is a kind of meandering book. There's no one topic really. Yeah, there's a lot of gold in there though.
Well, it's, as the title describes, Fooled by Randomness. So the whole entire book is about random things and the prevalence of random things in the world, in the universe, effectively. The things that really stuck out for me from that book were signal versus noise, and the fact that we need randomness. So diving into that a little bit more so signal versus noise really comes back to this idea that we become too consumed about things that are just noise. We spend far too long focused on things that are noise. We give too much credit to things that are just noise. So, for example, the daily controversies that come out in the news are nothing but noise most of the time. Maybe an exception to that rule that we've just all been through is COVID and the reportings of COVID when that first happened. No doubt, it's actually become probably more noise now in the sense of the news that's being reported on COVID. It's like things we don't really need to know about. And so he talks about, so his background coming from finance is everything kind of is seen through the world of the movements of markets and, how that kind of reflects out into the rest of the world. And that's the reason he was able to. Well, the reason he says he's able to have come up with his ideas for the way the world works is because of just how fast things happen in the markets and how many iterations of things happens in the markets. It gives you an opportunity to analyze many things that you may not be able to analyze in other places, and get a sense of that randomness. So he talks about that noise of the markets. So, every single day, people who are watching their stocks go up or down, it's just noise. Most of the time, those movements are noise. It's not until you see something like, again, related to COVID, when the, what is it, a 20-25% drop in the entire market. That's not, that's not noise. There's some signal going on there. There's some real impact happening there.
So, I mean, how does that idea percolate through the other episodes? I mean, I can see it straight away. Makes me think about the How to Start a Startup series, and some of the stuff we talked about in that episode around luck and randomness, probably as well. With
I'm interested to hear why, mate. What's your thoughts on that? So, what's your connection there?
Well, I don't want to back over what I talked about in the episode too much, but sort of around, I guess, what is your environment, the stockbroker environment or the dentist environment? And that's something that's stuck with me that I now carry around after the last 10 episodes that I've learned, is that the system that you're playing in has a big impact on whether you're more successful through your skill or your luck, and how much randomness plays into the environment you're in. It's made me think a lot about how that affects the industry that I work in the infrastructure industry and construction. Different parts of that are like stockbroking, and other parts of it are like dentistry, and it's an interesting interplay there. So
you're going to have any brash finger pointing, mate, for us today?
Oh, not at anyone in particular, but I think the whole industry could learn a lot about the idea of complexity and randomness, and would actually help it be more successful. So,
I think the one that I think the one that I recall is, this worked on the last project. This is the way it works, or those type of comments. Well, the reason it worked on the last project is just simply it could have been simply a matter of luck, And I think maybe you probably encounter this type of stuff more on the biggest of the big projects, because you encounter situations that may not have been encountered before, in time.
Well, yeah, the biggest projects are by their nature very interdependent and more complex. So the bigger the project, in terms of if it's a complex project also, and a lot of things are interconnected, and then you add more complexity by adding more systems and stuff that you have to do on top of it, you end up with this. Every time you do that, you move more towards stockbroking because you're introducing randomness into your environment. So, but that's a rabbit hole that perhaps some of our listeners will not, is very specific to construction, but you can start to apply these ideas to your life in different ways. What area am I playing in? Is the thing that I'm doing right now subject to a lot of randomness? And if it is, well, then I've got to have a good think about how I act.
Well, there's projects in every single industry, so it's exactly the same. I don't think there's really any difference between someone who's building software and someone who's building a bridge or a tunnel. That's
true.
The kind of, as this project scales up into the billions of dollars, the complexity just gets astronomical, and then you get the politics and all the other exciting elements that come with these projects. And so I think that off the back of that, there's a phrase that he uses throughout the book, which is pick your heroes wisely. Is kind of the it's kind of the round off of all of that. So think about who you look up to, and are they operating, do you look up to them? Typically we'll look up to people that might be successful or have particular character traits, but for the ones that are successful, have they been operating in that dentistry environment or that stockbroking environment?
And It's interesting that you say IT, because I kind of feel like that has a lot of similar, I guess, it seems to me that has a lot of similarities between construction in terms of the blowouts on the projects. So there must be a lot of complexity in that field as well.
I think that's projects, full stop.
Yeah, I guess so.
What's the law, mate? The law of expanding budgets and time.
I don't know. What is it?
There's a law. I can't recall the name. Anyway, there's some law basically says, whatever the size of the budget is, whatever the size of the time we've allowed to complete this project is how much it will cost and how long it will take, if not more.
Yes. Yeah. There's a negative asymmetry that goes with that.
Correct.
So what about other books, man? What else?
Well,
do you want me to give you one?
I think it's time for you to run with something.
All right. Well, I think The Obstacle is the Way was one of my favorites. It was one that we actually recorded quite a long time ago, but made it into the 20 to 30 series. And it's just a book that the tone of it is really it talks at you, I haven't read a book like that really.
Have you read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. I found it very, not ironically, consistently, it was written for me, it kind of sounded in a similar fashion to that. That very stoic talking at you, talking to yourself fashion. So what are you talking about?
It was, yeah. He'd kind of ask you questions almost. Say, but you're not like that. You think this way, you think that way when others don't, and you're kind of like, oh, I do that. It's quite confronting. But just the very name of the book seems to be quite a good guide in and of itself. The obstacle is the way. Move towards your issues and confront them. And his idea of sort of keeping moving. It's okay to feel scared or worried or what have you about whatever issues you're facing. But you need to move into action and try and solve them, accept them that they are. And I think that the realization I had after reading that book was that I was sort of going through my day hoping nothing bad would happen, So I'd wake up in the morning and go, and I still do this, but wake up in the morning and go, geez, I hope no problems happen today. But the truth is that there'll always be problems, and that you have to kind of, if you start to accept that as a premise, some of the stress of worrying about what the next problem is kind of goes away.
Yeah, it's the very stoic way of looking at things, which is, every moment is in itself. It's is everything. So you will encounter whatever it is that you encounter. You still have you, if that makes sense. And so you can choose to do whatever you want in each of those moments. I find it one really interesting thing for me off the back of that book, mate, was there was very much like that action bias. But it wasn't action bias in the sense of just acting. I think he also emphasized that, like, make the right action to some degree.
Yeah. Don't be careless. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, whatever situation you encounter, you will be able to move through it. And don't get hung up on whether you will be able to move through it or not. But yeah, don't go around flailing and which sounds like it's more acting on emotion than anything else. In that sense, it's like there's been no consideration of this action here, which is acting on emotion.
But that kind of comes to, if you haven't done the first part of that model, which is to accept what is true and bring your what you want to the situation and not try and kind of pretend it hasn't happened or what have you. Kind of accept reality and make something good of it, you know. Which, depending on the situation, might not always be possible, you know. We are human, so. But yeah, a very helpful book. I really like this book, so that was one of my top ones.
Yeah, and he loves pumping out books, and I think he's just released or is about to release another one called Lives of the Stoics.
Right.
Which is probably now his, 8th or 9th or something plus book. He's a machine. And he's 30,
isn't he?
32, 33, 34, something like that.
That's cool. What else?
So a big bang for buck, if you will, from the last 10 episodes is Lessons from History. It is by far the smallest book that we read in the last, I think it's probably 100 pages in length. And there is so much in it. It is so dense. There is so much knowledge in it. And there's like effectively the joint work of a life partnership between husband and wife working on the same, overarching life project together that has found its way into this book. And
the very ability to say that much so succinctly is an art almost.
I totally agree. They've clearly written a lot, both of them.
Yeah.
And
the fascinating thing about it was that when I read it, because for the prep for the episode, I read it, and I'd read it a few years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, I read it again. I was understanding things that I didn't understand the time before that when I first read it. And there'll be stuff that I'll understand when I read it in 10 years that I don't understand now. That's what's so interesting about it to me. I'm exactly the same. I've read the book twice now too, and the second reading, you come back to it, and there's so many different things. And you could look at, if you're looking at if you're doing it in hard copy or whatever, then you might have your notes or some underlines and things, and you look at those underlines that you've had, and you're like, why would I even underline this? Like, this is obvious, or this is basic knowledge. But the reality is, at the time that you were first going through it, it wasn't. It was something that really grabbed you, and this book is definitely one of those books that I think you could come back to. I'm sure we'll come back to this in another 10 years' time, mate, and then it will be drawing us in even more, and we'll be still saying, bloody young Ryan, young Lachie, what were they thinking of underlining this bit of the book and writing this little comment? Yeah. Anything in particular, like any themes from that one that I know it's such a dense book, but is there anything that you wanted to pull out?
Yes. So we are all destined to be human is the big summary of the book, because the whole book is broken up into different disciplines. It's like history and politics, history and economy, history and socialism, and all these other there's like 10 to 15 different bits it's broken up into. And effectively you could round the entire thing off just saying, we haven't changed at all, across this entire length of history. And to think that we have, or to think that we're more sophisticated now, is just simply not true. People are the same. And the thing that has progressed, though, is society itself, built off the back of the systems that we have in society. But every single person that's born is born into they aren't born in, inheriting all this knowledge, inheriting all this culture, inheriting all this language, these beliefs, these understandings, the perspective they look at the world. That transmission needs to happen for every single person. And I think that was it seems very obvious, but until it's like pointed out to you, it's kind of a little bit hidden, maybe to some degree. And so what's really exciting is the fact that the systems that we have been able to build have allowed society to progress. So we're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, and those giants have been transmitted through the systems that we've got to enable society. So the political systems, the knowledge bases, whatever. Now we're looking at technology.
It's just looking at the world from or humans and society from such a zoomed out lens. It's at 10,000 feet and throughout time. Is an incredible, and it's kind of to prove your point about it. We haven't changed much. The book feels a bit like it was written, 5-10 years ago. It's pretty, and that goes to show it's a little bit timeless,
Well, it was written in the 60s or 50s.
50s or 60s. So not much. You couldn't say that about many books. So really, really cool book.
Yeah, it's like you could place this book anywhere in time and it's still just totally relevant,
Yeah, it was almost like it's not without bias, but it's looking at humans as an animal almost. And the only other book I've read like that was *Sapiens*,
Mm-hmm. Which hasn't had an appearance yet, but it will one day.
Felt very objective, yeah.
My favorite quote from that whole book was, "Nothing is clearer in history than the adoption by successful rebels of the methods they were accustomed to condemn in the forces they deposed."
So that's just summarizing Animal Farm in one sentence.
Correct, yeah.
Pretty cool.
That's exactly right. And that was a bold statement that they made, and they have studied history, all of human history, and for them to come out with something like that is quite interesting.
Mm.
And I think we're seeing quite a bit of that even today.
So that was in my top 2 as well. Lessons from history. Spoiler. So
have you got anything else there? Have you got anything else to bring out, mate, from the book?
I think they were my 2 points that I added earlier. Really, just that kind of interesting, timeless aspect and the view from above. It's quite insightful. So I think, but a special mention for me, American Kingpin, absolute roller coaster of a book, of a read or a listen. And it's just it's a really fun read, even though it's a bit dark. It's gripping, and there's actually a lot to kind of learn from that too.
Fun. I felt myself constantly on edge when I was listening to this book, because you just, like, what was being constructed is just crazy, and it was always like something was about to just be unraveled. But it was I think it was really
stressful, wasn't it?
Really well written book.
Perhaps it wasn't maybe fun's not the right word, but it feels like you're watching a thriller, but it really happened. And it becomes more and more absurd the longer it goes on.
That's it. Yeah. There was an uncanniness to the whole thing.
It's incredible. And just, the power of the internet is an interesting thing. It's got some interesting comments on, like, say, libertarianism and those kind of things too, and trying to take those kind of concepts to their extreme.
Yeah, well, that's very much coming back to lessons from history, mate. There was big comments made about both, communism and about effectively libertarianism, and how they, at the when they both get to the, the extreme ends, into complete fruition, disaster happens. And that's exactly where you get that quote, that favorite quote that I mentioned, where they become the thing they set out to get rid of in the first place.
That's definitely something from lessons from history, isn't it? That you kind of need both sides, and the tension in the middle of the two is what kind of creates a good society. That they're both pulling, but you need them both so that you don't head to one end or the other too far. Otherwise, and then if you do, it course corrects through some very, very violent means.
Yeah, typically a lot of people.
And that's kind of true it's true in many cases. Like it's kind of true in business. You want partners who kind of have different views but have the same values, and then you kind of you can push each other and have that healthy tension. So yeah, it's quite a cool concept, that.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Definitely.
The yin and the yang.
The yin and the yang. And maybe the antithesis to that entire book was Shoe Dog. So this was the story of Nike and Phil Knight, which seemingly, so American Kingpin for me seemed like the ultimate grand master plan. Everything, he knew where he was heading, he knew where he wanted to go. And I think he got to where he got to just because he's just, obviously worked very hard, but also he was just extremely skilled. Everything was well timed. He'd marketed it, everything well. Shoe Dog is like, for me, the opposite of that. It was like the least planned thing that I'd ever listened to, and I was almost shocked as to how much of a house of cards the entire organization was forever. It's like if there was like one false move or one wrong conversation had, at the negotiating table, Nike wouldn't exist. And
it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
That story is just so cool. I loved that book because it felt very raw and honest, and it kind of made you feel like that he's human too. I mean, not a lot of biographies are written in that amount of candor, I don't think. I really felt like I was on that journey with him. Hey, with American Kingpin, do you think there's something I read? Have you ever read the book Into the Wild? It's about a guy called Chris something, and he basically.
Is this Kerouac?
Kerouac, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I haven't.
He went into the forest and went on this giant adventure, and ended up dying there. Spoiler. And
I love the spoiler alert after the spoiler.
The author goes on to sort of say that the reason he kind of wrote it is that he went through a similar thing when he was about Chris's age, kind of this post-teenage years, or just like, early 20s, late teens, where he went on this grand adventure into Alaska and I think climbed this mountain. Forgive me, these details are a little loose, but doesn't really matter. And almost died climbing this ice shelf, and he just had to do this kind of crazy adventurous thing. It was something that happens to some people around that age. And I wonder if that was the same for Ross in American Kingpin, that this was his crazy adventure. And now he's a little older. I just wonder how. I'd be fascinated to hear an interview with him, which there isn't one. But
I wonder if there is one. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe one that really, I'd love one that just really, a proper interview that he really opens up about how he feels about all that looking back. So.
You need like an extended like Joe Rogan episode or something with him.
Yeah.
Really fascinating, mate. But I think there's some people that they're always like that, though. I was actually thinking we shouldn't bring it up, but Yvon Chouinard, just like going out on his rock climbing adventures and doing like multi-day rock climbs, like sleeping halfway through a climb. It's very, they're on a completely different level. wavelength in terms of like risk and just, the thrill of adventure. Yeah, so good on them.
Yeah. So we recently recorded a couple of episodes about Peter Thielen's 0 to 1. So we haven't talked about him much in this episode because I feel like I've done it to death. But great book. Just want to put 0 to 1. Great book. Just want to put that in there.
So I think we've mentioned about 8 books so far, something like that.
We've clouded it.
Yeah,
we've clouded it.
I think we had a. I think one of the episodes was the Abstract Chat 2. So we've only got one more book probably, mate, to mention, and then we've mentioned all 10. Well done.
Good effort. Well, let's move on. So tell us what's been happening with us and the pod.
Okay. So what's exciting? So we have nearly clicked over 5,000 listens. 5,000 listens, which is super exciting, mate.
It's crazy. I'm amazed by that, and it's bloody awesome. I love it.
Yeah, so. certainly. We love just seeing and hearing from people that have been interested in the show, and it's always nice to hear that people are enjoying getting something out of it. So yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for listening.
I love it. Thank you so much, and I love hearing when people say, "Oh, I bought this book because of you guys." It's usually the Black Swan.
Yeah, it's usually a Nassim book. Yeah. That's really, really nice. And I think that it's a bit hard to tell, but there's something in the vicinity of maybe 60 subscribers for the show overall, and we've got an increased audience outside of Australia now, which is, that's cool. So it's not just us listening to the show anymore. You lucky? Is that 60 including iTunes and stuff? I believe so. Yeah, it's just a number. It's like the combining of the multiple numbers. I mean, that's an exciting number for us too, right? Hugely. So, yeah. Oh, it's something to be proud of. I reckon it's awesome, but it's really something that we've got to thank other people for. So, yeah. And anything else you want to mention about the show, mate? Well, just how much I'm enjoying doing it. I'm still loving it. Every episode I really enjoy recording and getting ready for it. And I think hopefully we're continuing to improve over time, and we'll keep trying to, iterate on the show and make it more interesting and better every time we record. Well, if there's something that we've learned across all the episodes and all the business and hero's journey books that we've touched on, which is pretty well covers everything that we've touched on, it's the iteration that counts. So, and I think that'll hopefully continue into the future. Have you read Hero of 1,000 Faces? No, I do need to get into a bit of Joseph Campbell. Is that right? Yeah. I pretty do interesting want to read one. That. That's a future episode. For sure. I think you've spoken about that before. That's one thing that's weird. Like, I'm sure I'm repeating myself on a whole heap of episodes without realizing it. So I'm sorry about that. Here's a really interesting thought that I've had. So I actually, in listening to other people's podcasts, you actually find that happens a lot. And people are typically repeating the ideas that they know best. And some shows are very much pointed in this direction, particularly if there's a real specific theme to the show. And so it's maybe something that I want to try and avoid doing, but I'm not sure if it's even going to be possible. Because maybe eventually we always tie things back to our framework for reality, We always want a way to kind of thread it into the rest of the story that we understand. But I think you could probably draw that through our episodes. I'm sure you could. I'm sure you could just come up with the exact same kind of themes across the entire show. But I'm really interested to see how we can explore that. And I think maybe the way that you you do that is by, the fact that each book is effectively covering a different space, a different area. There's opportunity for that, but there's always going to be the kind of biased perspective that we have of linking it back to our own mental models of the world. So
I guess, it's
something to keep an eye on.
It is. And hopefully part of this journey is adding new things to that mental model that we can draw back on, so it becomes a bit more whole.
So Lachie, what's now happening in this in your life for this post? What are we in now? Are we in COVID era? Are we in post-COVID era? What are we in?
Definitely not post-COVID where I am in Melbourne. We're locked down. I haven't really been able to work outside of my house since March. So there was a period there where we went back to the office for a month or so, but that was about it.
But when is it going to be called post-COVID? Is it when we get a vaccine, or is it when we come out of lockdown? Is it what?
I don't know. It depends what.
Or is it when we forget about it and the next problem occurs?
But for me, so that's been kind of an interesting experience, working and living very much in one place, which I'm sure everyone's going through. But luckily I am still working and things are good on that front, and things with the family are all good too. So not really too much to complain about if I just have to stay at home a bit, but it is an interesting experience. Some good things, some bad things, I think. So.
Yeah, I think that's a repeated story, mate, across many, many different people through this time, and hopefully, maybe some great benefits have probably come from this strange period. Picking up new habits or new ways of looking at things, or spending more time with family, to name a few. So, particularly because we haven't maybe got an hour commute each way on the way to work. To get to where you need to get. So, and maybe we might see a big, I'm sure we'll see a big shift in organisations moving to more remote work where possible.
And what about you? You've been doing some coding and some French learning.
I'm not sure I've been doing the French learning, but that's certainly something that I picked up in going back in lockdown. It was always something I wanted to get into. So learned some software development.
It's pretty cool.
I was always fascinated about seeing the world through that lens, because I'd never really grasped it. And
through ones and zeros.
Through the binary code. And I'm not sure I'm fully there yet, but I feel like a lot of things click into place. I think a lot of things make a lot more sense when you look at them now.
That's cool. So you're on a meandering journey.
Yeah, exciting.
Of learning. That's pretty awesome.
Flaneuring.
Yeah, that's it. Talking about central mental model. And yeah, for me, I've been living kind of a slow life, a quiet life at this time, I think. But work has been quite stressful at the same time, so it's kind of strange. So,
exciting times, mate. Exciting times, and we'll see what holds for the next abstract chat. Hey,
Abstract Chat 4, where you'll hear about what episodes were there and also the name of the authors. So watch out for that. That's going to be worth waiting for.
No McClouding about.
That's going to
stick.
See you later.
See ya.
Yeah.